Today, we're literally tearing up the history books. We're going to start with the ultimate historical villain, Yersinia pestis. You probably know it better as the Black Death. It was a microscopic killer that literally brought an entire continent to its knees. But how exactly did it do that? Well, these bacteria didn't just infect fleas, they completely hijacked them. They multiplied so rapidly that they actually blocked the insects' stomachs, driving them into this starving, biting frenzy. Since they couldn't digest blood, the fleas just vomited bacteria-laced blood right back into their hosts. Hitched to rats along major trade routes, they traded way more than just silk. They brought deadly devastation. Now, because of the plague, we've spent decades fighting this ruthless, highly sanitized war on bacteria. We constantly bombard them with antibiotics, and we buy products that promise to kill 99.9% of germs. But here is a massive paradigm shift for you. Out of all the bacteria on Earth, less than 1% are actually harmful to humans. The other 99%, they're the only reason you are breathing right now. To really understand this, you have to grasp the sheer, mind-bending scale we're talking about here. 200 trillion. If every single bacterium on Earth held hands, the line would stretch to the sun and back 200 trillion times. And they aren't just out there in the wild. Right now, there are actually more bacteria living inside your gut than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. You have literally never been alone, not for a single second of your life. Which brings us to a really fascinating puzzle, the bizarre breast milk mystery. See, before you were born, you lived inside your mother's womb, which is a completely sterile, germ-free sanctuary. But the exact moment a baby is born, it embarks on a microscopic gathering mission. As it passes through the birth canal, it gets completely coated in billions of bacteria, building its very own microbial forest from scratch. This leads us straight into one of the wildest mysteries in all of human biology. Why do human mothers make food their babies absolutely cannot digest? Human breast milk contains massive amounts of complex sugars called HMOs. But here's the crazy part. A newborn baby's stomach has absolutely zero biological way to digest them. So why would evolution waste so much energy producing something a baby can't even use? It turns out it's a brilliantly designed biological loop. First, the mother produces these complex HMO sugars. Second, a very specific type of bacteria living in the baby's gut, called B. infantis, eats those sugars. And third, as the bacteria feasts, it produces special acids that nourish the baby and actively train its young immune system. The mother isn't actually feeding her baby. She's intentionally feeding the bacteria. How wild is that? This microscopic handoff is absolutely vital for our long-term health. When babies are born via C-section, they miss out on that crucial birth canal bacteria. And when they're fed formula, they miss the HMOs that feed their gut flora. The data on this is super clear. Skipping this initial handoff leads to significantly higher rates of asthma, allergies, and autoimmune diseases later in life. This completely upends our modern obsession with hygiene. Leading microbiologists like Rob Knight and Jack Gilbert say it best. Dirt is actually good. We've kind of created a modern medical blunder with all this over-sanitization. By constantly boiling pacifiers and keeping kids in these hyper-sterile bubbles, we're literally starving their immune systems of the data they desperately need to fight off real threats. Just look at what happens when we actually let nature do its job. Kids who grow up with an indoor dog, an animal tracking in dirt and microbes all day, see a 13% reduction in asthma rates. But kids raised on farms, the ones constantly interacting with livestock and mud, they see a massive 50% drop. Early exposure to animal microbes literally acts as a training camp for a child's developing immune system. If you still aren't convinced, consider the sterile mousetrap. Back in the 1920s, scientists raised lab mice inside completely germ-free chambers. Zero bacteria whatsoever. But there was a deadly catch. The absolute second these pure, totally sterile mice were exposed to the real world, they instantly died. Without their microbial armor, the everyday air we breathe was completely lethal to them. You see, bacteria are the invisible engines running the Earth. Without them, everything just stops. You literally couldn't breathe because ocean cyanobacteria produce 50% of our atmosphere's oxygen. Cows and sheep, they'd starve because they completely rely on bacteria to digest grass, and soil bacteria pull nitrogen straight out of the air to feed plants. Simply put, no bacteria means no plants, no animals, and absolutely no us. Let's rewind for a second. 2 billion years ago, bacteria were the undisputed rulers of the planet. Over millions of years, they terraformed Earth, pumping out the very oxygen that allowed complex life to evolve. But here's the ultimate twist. They didn't just set the stage for us, they became us. The mitochondria, those tiny powerhouses generating energy in your cells right now, those were once free-floating ancient bacteria that permanently merged with our bodies. We spend millions of dollars trying to scrub them away and sanitize our world. But the truth is incredibly simple. We aren't avoiding them. We literally are them. You are essentially just a walking, talking ecosystem, a massive colony of brilliant, invisible organisms wearing a human disguise. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. If trillions of ancient bacteria are running your immune system, digesting your food, and actively powering your brain, who is actually in charge? You or your microbiome?